I also didn't realize that I was standing in front of a ledge. I don't understand that myself. I mean, you walk looking ahead, you assess the terrain. Where could there be a danger, and so on. So there I was, and with the next step, I was gone and fell.
Mr. Felfer, you're a professional soldier and assistant mountain guide. On 27 October 2017, you experienced a dramatic accident in the Hohe Tauern, Austria, at around 2,500 meters, which subsequently led to a near-death experience. I would like to ask you to start by telling us what happened exactly back then.
So let me say in advance, I can't answer from my perspective whether it was dramatic and whether it was a near-death experience. But briefly, the background. I was planning a mountain tour with my son, Michi. At the time, we were training for a competition that I had managed to get him interested in, ski mountaineering. We did a bit of altitude training for this competition.
How old was your son at the time?
He was 16 years old. And then I told him that there was the Hohenwart Peak in Pusterwald Forest near us, at an altitude of around 2,500 meters. We left quite early in the morning, hiked up until midday, and returned early in the afternoon. And I had a serious mountaineering accident. I didn't witness the fall myself. It was only when I came round at the hospital that I slowly realized what had happened. Of course, there are several perspectives on this event. On the one hand, from those who were there and told me what happened, and the story from my perspective.
Let's just start with the external events. The two of you climbed up to the summits.
Yes, we did.
Nothing special happened at first, right?
It was like this. We went up via the Pölsenhütte. At first, this is a beautiful hiking trail that leads upwards, but the last ascent is very steep. We're talking about a gradient of 30 or 35 degrees. So that's very strenuous. And there was a snowfield that we had to cross, old snow. With sturdy shoes, it wasn't really a problem, but you really had to concentrate on getting up. But I don't think my boy really had the ideal shoes for it. So I thought I'd go ahead and make tracks in the snow. And so we climbed up to the summit. It was about 10:45 in the morning. Up until then, everything had worked great. Everything was fine. Then the odds changed. We set off at sunrise, but then at the top the weather changed. I knew that the weather would get worse and worse later on.
How long did that hike to the summit take?
I reckon we were travelling for 2.5 to 3 hours. Suddenly the wind came up, and it started to snow lightly. I thought to myself, fine, no danger. But let's not take a break. Let's go straight back down. I actually wanted to go back down via the ascent route. Then I thought, no, not at all. These steep sections, the snowfield. If my son slips there, he won't find a foothold anywhere. So let's go back down via the north side. In winter, you can go on a lovely ski tour there. I've been up there several times, but it's also very steep terrain.
But not as dangerous as the other route.
Yes, exactly, because there was this particular steep slope at the front. So we walked away from the summit. And then something unsettled me again. Somehow I thought, no, we should go down the other side after all.
But you actually wanted to take this route because of your son.
Yes, exactly. Because I thought it would be better after all. I was afraid that he might slip because he wasn't wearing really sturdy shoes. And I was a bit doubtful and worried that something might happen. So I decided to take the other route after all. It was a normal alpine path downhill, which seemed right for me. But then, on this path, after about 100 or 150 meters, I thought, I'll go back again. At about 90 degrees to my right, I saw a basin, and there was a mountain pine forest with trees 2 to 3 meters high. I'd been through this forest before, and knew that it was easy to get lost in it. I didn't want to take this shortcut. I wanted to go back,
but you weren't quite sure.
No, I felt torn. But on the other hand, the decision had been made. What was going to happen? So we moved on. It had started to snow more heavily in the meantime. I said that we should hurry down now. Then I realized that I'd gone too far to the right, towards the rock. And I definitely didn't want to do that because I didn't have a rope with me. We should continue to the left, down over the mountain pasture.
So the cliff was on the right.
On the right, we got more and more into rocky areas. And on the left was a mountain pasture, and you can go down there. That was also the ascent track in winter. Yes, and then I stopped and gave my son another overview of the area, which direction we had come from, and where we were going. All the things around us, so that he could orientate himself a little. So I'm standing there with him, explaining to him, and then suddenly, from one moment to the next, I'm somewhere else. How am I supposed to explain that? In an absolutely free space, in a universe without stars. That sounds kind of hard to understand. It sounds a bit difficult. But to illustrate, if I switch off the light in a room, I can still feel myself in the room. I can feel objects, an armchair, whatever is in the room. I experience spatial boundaries. But what I experienced, on the other hand, was completely open, free. I felt very light. It was a totally pleasant feeling, free. But it's like an experience on holiday. Someone tells me that I was there on holiday. And I say, yes, nice, great. If you've been there yourself, you might be able to relate to someone else's description of their holiday. But experiencing something yourself is something completely different. You can talk about it, but you're often not really understood. I experienced a feeling of freedom. For me, it was as if I was in a floating state. I didn't question it any further, but it was a really great feeling. And then I felt a blow to the back of my head. I just noticed it. There was a blow to the back of my head. It didn't hurt. I was completely immersed in this feeling of freedom. The next thing I felt was an impact on my back. As if wood was breaking. I felt it, but I couldn't place this breaking. It didn't hurt.
Did you always have this feeling of freedom the whole time?
Yes, everything was great, but there was no visible space.
There was simply nothing visible.
No, I was looking into a room, very consciously, like we're sitting here now. I'm looking into this room, but there was no boundary. I was simply there, but I didn't question this state.
And a part of this feeling of freedom, was there another special sensation?
Nothing hurt me. I was so light. When I go swimming and let myself float in the water, I'm light too. I'm almost weightless, but I can feel the element of water around me. I did a skydiving training course. I jumped out, and during the few seconds of free flight, I felt almost weightless. But I still felt the element of air and the whistling and the pressure, the air pressure. But in this experience of freedom, there was simply nothing there. It was simply floating, perhaps like in outer space. Well, what happened? I was standing on a ledge, which I didn't realize, and with the next step, I fell 50 meters in free fall.
50 meters in free fall?
Yes, the mountain rescuers said it was more than one rope length. The rope is 40 meters long, so it's about 50 meters. And then I fell into a steep gully. The angle of impact was very steep. If it hadn't been so steep, I would have been killed instantly. But I hit the ground and then slid another 50 meters downhill. And then I came to rest somewhere in a mountain stream.
And you didn't consciously experience any of this?
No. In hindsight, I believe that this floating feeling must have occurred during the fall. But I don't know. It was just pleasantly beautiful.
Like in another dimension.
Maybe it was a different dimension.
What happened to you physically as a result of the fall, 50 meters in free fall?
It was like this. I had 2 lacerations on my head, 9 ribs were broken in a row, 2 vertebrae were broken, my lung had been punctured twice, it then collapsed, my left shoulder was dislocated, a bone was sticking out at this point, and my left knee was shattered. I was only told all this afterwards. I didn't realize it myself at the time. I didn't feel anything. However, this marvelous state was suddenly followed by an incredible heaviness. I felt so heavy that I had the feeling a tank was driving over me. And I had such tunnel vision. And way up high, very small, I saw Michi. I shouted, "What are you doing up there? Come down, what are you doing up there?" We both shouted. And the next moment I was back in this feeling that everything was marvelous. I was floating in this space, but I knew nothing of what had gone before. I was simply in a great state. And the next moment I noticed Michi sitting next to me. He handed me the mobile phone and said, "I don't think you can get out of there. I think we need to call the rescue. You can't get out of there." And I asked him, "Have you hurt yourself? I've got everything I need in my rucksack. I just can't reach it right now." He said, "No, you've fallen." "I haven't fallen. We'll go on in a minute. Let's rest for a few minutes. We'll be moving on in a minute." What was also funny was that he said he would alert the emergency services. And I said, "We don't need a rescue service. That's an unnecessary expense. Forget that idea. We'll go straight on." And then I was suddenly back in that other state, in that relaxed, great state, and didn't really want to go back to the side where I was in pain. Looking back, it was probably the case that I was conscious at the time when I experienced Michi with me, and the other side was probably unconsciousness. But I didn't realize that.
So awareness, consciousness was actually always there. It just manifested itself differently.
Whether that was always consciousness is for others to decide. In any case, I jumped back and forth between 2 worlds again and again, but I can't say at what intervals. I don't know. What happened? Michi then alerted the emergency services. There was poor radio contact, but he managed to send an emergency call.
Michi was on the summit before that.
Yes, he was at the summit first, but then somehow ran down.
Towards you?
Down to me, yes.
To see what was going on?
Yes, I must have woken up when he was next to me.
And where were you located?
I was lying in a small mountain stream. The water flowed over me.
So you were lying in the middle of a stream?
Yes, it wasn't a big stream, but the water ran over me. Michi held my head upright so I wouldn't drown. And he tried to put a woolly hat on me. He later told me that he didn't dare to pull me out of the water because I was lying in the water like a parcel. In hindsight, that was the right decision. When you pull hard on such an injured body, then something can happen.
With broken vertebrae?
And especially with a collapsed lung. After a while, a rescue helicopter arrived. And Michi saw it. He shouted and screamed. But he couldn't be seen from the helicopter. In the meantime, the weather had become very bad. It had started to snow heavily. Michi noticed that the helicopter was landing. He wanted to run up to it, but then it took off again before his eyes. It flew away again. Michi threw stones at it and shouted.
You both simply couldn't be seen from there.
No, that's how it was. Interestingly, I met the pilot years later by chance. He told me we were there, but we just didn't see anything. He couldn't have flown any lower. That was impossible. Michi then went down towards the valley. He came to a road and met a second rescue team there by chance. At first, the men thought someone was there to show them the way. Michi told them what had happened. The team was travelling in a Touareg with 4-wheel drive and snow chains. But they couldn't get any further. They got stuck because it was snowing so heavily. They had to unload everything and climb up on foot, up onto the ridge. They had been travelling for at least an hour or more. When they got to the top, they asked Michi, "Where is he?" "Down there somewhere." That was over 100 meters in altitude. They had to set up an abseiling station with an intermediate belay so they could reach me. A mountain mate of mine was also there at the time. He didn't recognize me at all. He only saw a person who was as blue as a plum, pale and covered in blood. He thought I had already died.
How long had you been lying in the stream by then?
I don't know exactly.
It must have been several hours.
I lay in the water for a total of 5 hours. I don't know exactly, but I was snowed in 30 or 40 centimeters deep. A lot of time passed before the helpers could get to me. Then they said we would try to carry out a rescue with a cable pull. The rescue workers told me that the pilot of a police helicopter from Graz had offered to fly to us. They advised him against it. "No, don't do that. We've got a weather storm here. There's nothing you can do for us." But he came anyway and waited nearby so that he could take off. And then, during the preparations for the recovery, the fog actually lifted so that he could take off. An air rescuer went into the gorge with me on a 50-meter rope. But they didn't manage to rescue me. I was there, the helicopter was there, the air rescuer was there, but he couldn't fly low enough. So the operation was cancelled. The pilot then suggested extending the rope to 100 meters. But due to legal regulations, no flight rescue system is allowed to hang from the rope at such a length. So the pilot flew back to me with a 100-meter rope. But due to the strong wind, the rope bent too much. I was there, the helicopter was there, but we didn't come together again. So it was cancelled again. They wanted to take me away in a different way. Meanwhile, I only ever experienced myself in this relaxed space where everything was so easy.
So you didn't realize how much time the rescue took?
Not at all, no. But I have 5 images in my head from that time. One picture, for example, was I wake up in a winter landscape. That was probably when Michi went away from me to get help. I woke up and I thought to myself, how did I get into this tricky situation? Which side did I come from? Where do I have to go? Where are my people?
So you didn't even realize that you had crashed?
No, not at all, no. I was scared. Shit, I'd lost my bearings. That's soldier lingo. I was lost. Where do I have to go? Where are my people? In hindsight, I realized that I associated my condition with situations I had experienced earlier during training, during an orientation march. We got lost. Where do I have to go? And I looked for my people, noticed the deep snow, but I didn't know what was going on. And then I was back on this relaxed, beautiful side, and I didn't want to go back. Another image was I saw the rescuers lifting me up in a vacuum mattress, and I gave them instructions on what to do, because I thought I was a test subject in an emergency exercise, and I thought, I'll be fine. The thoughts went back and forth like that.
I suspect that your brain has associated your inner experience and what you have seen with familiar situations in order to form a plausible reality.
I've practiced something like this many times during emergency drills involving mountain rescue. Someone has fallen and we have to get there. Someone is searched for, then dug out, and so on.
And you had the impression that you were participating in such a training exercise?
I'm there as a test subject. I didn't realize it was actually about rescuing me. And then I was gone again, on the other side. The emergency services worked hard to rescue me, and the pilot didn't give up and said he wanted to make one last attempt. He was flying the wrong way round to me. He then actually flew the helicopter backwards into the gorge, like parking a car. This allowed him to fly closer to the rock face, because if something unpredictable happened, he had the chance to fly forwards again immediately. That would otherwise not be possible. And that's how it worked. They hooked me up, lifted me up, and flew me out.
In other words, you were already prepared in the vacuum mattress. It was just a matter of getting you up.
Exactly. They lifted me up, transferred me later, and then took me down into the valley to Pusterwald. There were a lot of police and rescue workers there, a large contingent. And a short time later, I underwent emergency surgery. What was also interesting was that some time later, a woman came to my bedside in hospital. She asked me, "Mr. Felfer, how are you?" I said, "Yes, quite well, thank you. Can you still remember me?" I said, "No, I didn't realize that we knew each other." She was a pretty woman, auburn-haired. She knew me and I didn't know her. It turned out that she was the emergency doctor who put a stent in me. She punctured my body so that my lungs could rebuild.
So she treated you in hospital?
No, where the accident happened.
So she came to you?
Yes, the rescuers realized that there was a problem with the lungs. If the lung has collapsed, then the situation is serious. I'm not a doctor, but as far as I understand it, they cut me open and then punctured me in a certain place so that it would work again. And then they flew me on to the hospital.
Do you remember any pictures from that time?
I remember one picture. It was a really powerful one. I also deal a lot with space travel, with the universe. And I thought I was in the command center of a spaceship, Sputnik 1 or something like that, somewhere in space. But at least in the command center of a spaceship. I saw lots of flashing lights and shadows, but I couldn't identify them. But it was always a good feeling. In hindsight, I realized that I was connected to some kind of equipment in the intensive care unit, and the nurses were running back and forth. Waking up then might also have been an exciting story.
It's all exciting.
So, I was in intensive care, but I didn't realize it myself at the time. I woke up, looked up at the ceiling, and Michi was sitting next to me. I could feel it. I looked at him and shouted, "Michi, the sun is coming through the clouds. It's getting nicer. Come on, let's go." I wanted to get up and tried to tear myself away, but of course that didn't work because the tubes went into my body. Well, I didn't see that. I wanted to break free and walk away, and I said to Michi, "Why are you holding me back?" He said, "You had a fall." I said, "What nonsense, what are you talking about?"
To have crushed yourself, that's impossible.
"I've got everything you need in my rucksack, but I can't reach it at the moment." And he said, "You had a fall, you're in hospital now." Then I looked around and realized that I was in hospital. But for me, it was like a dream. I didn't want to experience this negative, stressful state. I wanted to be back where I was before. I wanted to return to this relaxed, warm, relieved state. That's where I wanted to escape to. But I also wanted to go back to the original place, to the mountain where I had my last memory. It was all so real. I knew I was there now.
You were back at the place where it happened.
Where I had experienced the last moments, below the summit cross, where we had stopped.
So you wanted to connect to this moment, to the normal state.
But I didn't say I wanted to go there now. I was simply there mentally. But in reality, I was in the intensive care unit. I kept going back and forth between worlds. And that almost drove me mad. I also said, "Michi, help me. Something's not right today. I can't find my bearings. I don't know what's going on. Where are we now?" The situation persisted for a very long time. I kept going back and forth. I just wanted to be back there and then move on. But of course, it was no longer possible to continue because I had fallen. A neurologist told me that if, for example, I were to get up to go somewhere and stumble, for example on the doorstep, I would necessarily remember later that I tripped and where I tripped, and that I had perhaps tried to hold on to something before it was over. Because the body's protective function switches off consciousness. But I can't remember anything that happened. This means that more must have been deleted from my hard drive somehow. But, on the other hand, I ask myself, how great must the pain be for this function to kick in? Because when you hit your finger with a hammer, it hurts so much that it brings tears to your eyes. But the body still doesn't switch off.
When did you really realize and accept what had happened? Was it days later, or rather soon after waking up?
In total, I spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit. 1 week in the normal ward, and then they sent me home. They said my survival was assured. That was the case. The hospital is not a rehabilitation centre. I have to get better at home. A doctor then asked me, "How long do you think you will be on sick leave?" I replied, "Doctor, it would be nice if I could stay in at the weekend. I'm going back to work next week." He laughed and said, "You'll need at least 6 months to get better." I was so relaxed, of course, because of the morphine I was given, the painkillers and all the medication. I really wasn't in any pain. It was only when I got home that I thought I was going to die. Everything suddenly hurt so much. I couldn't walk for almost a year.
But immediately afterwards, you always like to return to this pleasant, weightless state.
I kept flying back there when I was at home. That continued for a very long time.
So you still managed to experience this state at home?
It just happened. I didn't realize what was actually real. If we're both sitting here now, is it real? It feels like it is. I can pinch myself and realize, ouch, it hurts, it's real.
Did the situation seem as real or even more real to you back then?
This state was so real that I didn't even question whether it was real or not. It was a situation like when we're sitting here now.
So it wasn't a dreamlike state or anything like that?
No, it was reality. I try to compare. When do I know that I was dreaming? Shortly after waking up. Then I ask myself, is today Monday or Sunday? Do I have to go to work or can I stay in bed? And I realize, oh yes, I've just dreamt something stupid. I know that I was dreaming, but I don't know it in the dream phase. Because why does someone wake up in a cold sweat? Because they were dreaming and couldn't control the experience. If I can control the dream phase, then I know it's just a dream. I don't care about it.
You never had the feeling that you were waking up from a dream?
No, I was there. I was where it happened. And that made me think. That's why I think it might be possible that someone will tap me on the shoulder at some point and say, "Come on, wake up." We're so firmly convinced that our life here and now is real, but the dream phase is also so real that it is not questioned. The state in this other dimension was also absolutely real. I was there. And yet, I was somewhere else. So, have I had a near-death experience? No one told me that I was close to death. If I had actually died, I wouldn't have even realized it. I only experienced this moment, this unconsciousness, but it was so marvelous that I am no longer afraid of death.
So that has also changed since your experience?
Yes, absolutely. It's only bad when you come back. Life, survival, that can be painful, not death itself. If I go outside and someone hits me with a car, I might not even realize it. The body switches off when the pain becomes too great, and I consciously don't even realize what's happening. I'm not afraid of that.
How did you continue to feel? Did it become less common for you to be in this other state of consciousness? Or does it still happen today? Can you still go there?
A doctor told me that there are so-called triggers, moments that set something off. It still happens today that I consciously stop and ask myself, is this real now? That happens to me again and again. For example, when I'm traveling in the mountains. I'm still in the mountains. Thank God I can walk again. I do have body and nerve pain that accompanies me every day.
That's what's left.
Yes, I feel it strongly, especially in certain weather conditions. But I'm functional, let's put it that way. I still go to the mountains. I like being out there. But I walk more consciously, even more consciously. Because of this impression, I'm sitting there now and I go out. But I don't get outside. This experience, this moment, keeps coming back to me. I feel like Mr. Spock, who has been beamed away, doesn't know. How did I get here? Perhaps everyone knows this. I can remember this place. I've been there before, but I can't remember how I got there.
There is a gap in perception.
Exactly, because I was there. I told my son, look, we have to go there. We'll be down in no time. But I never got down there. I just woke up somewhere else.
Near-death experience is, of course, also just a term. It became established in the 1980s because people all over the world were analyzed who had such experiences. Certain situations within the experience have been defined, and there is now also a scale that can be used to define whether it was a deep or not so deep near-death experience. The experience doesn't necessarily have to take place near death. There are also other triggers. The term near-death experience is therefore somewhat problematic, but one characteristic of profound experiences is often that they have a very long, life-changing after-effect. Do you have the feeling that something has changed since then in your attitude towards other people, in your values?
Yes, absolutely. During the rehabilitation phase, I needed a lot of time to get well again. I got to know people and therapies, and I had a lot of time at my disposal that you don't normally have in the working world. There, it was more like being on a hamster wheel. You only have limited free time, which is then also scheduled. But if you can't do anything, then everything takes on a different priority, a different value. Today, my lifetime is many times more important to me than anything else. If I'm sitting here now, it's because I'm saying to myself, okay, I'll take my time for the interview. It's worth it to me. And whenever I die, I want everything around me to be in order. That's important to me.
You are living a more conscious life.
Yes, I'm not talking about external disorder now. But when I die, everything should be organized. I may no longer be there, but I can go with a clear conscience. That is important. And I use the time I have available, my lifetime, more intensively.
Have you more aware of the topic of finiteness? The knowledge that you only have a certain amount of time?
Exactly. You have a certain amount of time. I'm aware of that. Some time ago, both my parents, my father and mother, passed away within a year of each other. You spend a lifetime with these people. You grow up with them. You have so many memories. And then suddenly, they're no longer there. This means that I only have a certain amount of time at my disposal. You can think of it like using a meter measure and say to yourself, okay, as long as I stay healthy, I still have so and so many years of the total length available to me.
And you would like to experience this time as consciously as possible?
Yes, at some point, I may suddenly no longer be there.
Have there been other changes that you are aware of? Were there things that used to be very important to you at work, in your private life or in your hobbies that are no longer important? Has anything changed in this respect?
Yes, in my job, for example. I worked in training for many years. Training was my life. The job was like a hobby. You become completely absorbed in it. I never questioned it. But since the accident and what happened afterwards, it's no longer so important to me. I realize that I've actually been through it all, done everything, experienced the highs and lows thousands of times. But I want to reorientate myself now. I'm now doing something different that I haven't had the opportunity to do before. I used to say to myself, no, you can't do that. You have to do something else. That's rubbish. If you want to do something, then do it. Do it now. What are you waiting for?
Take your freedom.
Take your freedom, yes. Sure, everyone has their own structures that they can't easily get out of. Nevertheless, you have to do it. And that's my main focus now. That has changed a lot.
You have already said that you are no longer afraid of death. Has your religiosity, your faith, changed as a result of the experience?
My faith. Grew up a believer. I was an altar boy for many years. However, I later questioned what my faith really was. Everyone should believe what they think and defend it. That is perfectly fine. But even if it is difficult to explain, I am firmly convinced that there is some dimension that we as mere mortals cannot grasp. Why is that? Because I have experienced it. A dimension that is intangible, that cannot be grasped by the minds of little people like us. But 1,000% of the time there is something, but I can't say exactly what. But there is something, I know that, absolutely certain.
How did you feel after the experience? Did you find it easy to talk to someone about it, or did you not want to?
It was like this. Of course, everyone wanted to know what happened. And at some point, you come up with a kind of standard formula for the answer so that people are satisfied. Like when someone asks in passing, "How are you?" Then they don't really care how you are. And I say, "Yes, everything's fine." Okay, the question is answered. I kept getting these questions about my accident. But nobody can really understand what I experienced. I once had therapy with a psychologist. He at least pretended to understand me. Well, that's his job too, but he didn't really understand it either because he hadn't experienced it. Maybe it's like with a holiday. If I haven't been there myself, I can look at a report, okay, I can imagine it, but you actually have to have experienced it yourself right there. It's difficult to convey such an experience to an outsider.
How did you manage to reconstruct what exactly happened, given that you had a completely different inner experience of what happened? Did your son Michi tell you everything?
It was like this. I was lying in the intensive care unit, pretty much unable to move. I had no sense of space and time, whether an hour, 2 hours, or days had passed. 2 weeks were like the blink of an eye for me. I was always flying back and forth between worlds. One day, a fellow mountaineer who was on the rescue mission came and brought me a flask. It was made of aluminium and completely crushed. He had found it there. I asked him how he had experienced it all. He then told me what happened from his point of view, from the time he was alerted. That was interesting for me, of course.
Did the bottle he brought with him belong to you?
It was mine, yes. He found it. It was completely dented. He thought the bottle might have been lying upright in the rucksack, and when it hit the ground, it broke all my ribs. The bottle was completely dented. He told me his version of the rescue. My son, Michael, told me what he experienced directly. Other emergency services reported how they experienced it. And the doctor told me that I spoke to her on the spot, but I still can't remember it today. She had to cut everything open, and she talked to me. I was probably conscious at that moment. But I can't remember it. I can't place it in time. It's quite remarkable. In theory, I should also remember that I slipped or that I was holding on. But I don't have that memory. Strangely enough, I noticed the fall immediately. How is that possible? I realized that I was falling, albeit in this other dimension, and then felt the impact on my head and back. I don't know how that's possible.
When you review the whole day in your memory, do you have the feeling that this event was somehow in the offing? Were you perhaps unusually afraid for your son? You also told us about the uncertainty you experienced at the time. Which path should we take? That is probably quite unusual for you as a goal-oriented person.
Normally, when I plan a tour, I take a close look at the route, decide where to start, and what the destination is. You make a route plan and are prepared. Then you assess what level of difficulty you can expect. And while you're out and about, you decide again and again, is everything still right, or will it be too dangerous, and so on. But back then, in this situation, during the steep ascent in the snow, I had a bad feeling. I was worried that my son might slip. So I deliberately put every step into the snow so that he could walk in my tracks. Nevertheless, I had a bad feeling. That's why I didn't want to go back this way later. That was the first thing. And then, at the summit cross, Michi climbed onto the cross, all the way up. I didn't like that at all. I said, "Mickey, come back down." I didn't like that at all. I don't think he thought anything of it. He was just happy that we were up there. But that was the next unusual situation. And then, when we left, the decision to either go back down the side we came up or take the other side, I was in constant doubt. I had such doubts that I wanted to turn back several times. I was so indecisive that I thought, what's wrong with me today? I've made a decision, I should stick to it. What's going to happen? Turn left, go down, and off I go. I can't brood any longer. And yet this strong doubt remained, so that I was already doubting myself. I should never have told anyone anything like that. Everyone would have said, "What kind of weirdo are you?" But the doubts were just there. I also didn't realize that I was standing in front of a rocky outcrop. That's the next thing that irritates me. When you're walking, you look ahead, you judge the terrain you're walking on. Where is the danger? Where is it safe? And so on. I simply didn't realize that I was standing there and could fall at the next step.
I guess it had to be that way. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much.